Welcome back to Talking Textual with Janaea. I would like to welcome my special guests, William Shakespeare and Al Pacino, to discuss and compare their two texts, King Richard III, a historical tragedy, and Looking for Richard, a docudrama.
Yeah, we up in here.
In this episode, we will talk about how Al Pacino has reimagined Shakespeare's text into a docudrama to reunify with the modern audience and to explore why it is important to acknowledge Shakespeare within the 21st century. Welcome, guys. So, Shakespeare, what were you trying to convey with Richard's character, and do you yourself believe that your historical tragedy, King Richard III, disconnects from the modern audience?
My historical tragedy was based during the 15th century, in the Renaissance period in which I lived, where the purpose of my works was to entertain the audience of that time period. Using Richard as a protagonist allowed me to utilise a Machiavellian character with a god... with a god-defying attitude and a master manipulator with his communications. His central role as a direful pageant, an empty symbol of dignity without any substance, in which is expressed by Queen Margaret in Act 4, Scene 4, allows him to cast himself in different theatrical roles and harness the power of acting in ways that are able to manipulate others for his own gain without any empathy for anyone else. I chose to express this through the characterisation of Richard, as well as adhering to the convention of a historical tragedy, represented through alluding to the book of Leviticus in the Bible, in which states God had crafted people to reflect their personality. That dogs bark at me as I help by them. At 1 Scene 1, showing the exaggeration of his physical state in order to represent the reflection of his ugly personality. I feel as though the aspects of my work can hold relation to the modern audience, as we can see similarities in the modern day society, and many people power holding Machiavellian traits. For example, the current American president right now, tosser. But that's none of my business. Anyways, alluding to religious and political references allowed me to connect with my audience at the time. It kept the audience interested and intrigued. The timeline and setting of Richard III has historical reference to the War of the Roses and the pursuit of power and providentialism, in the concept to which the Elizabethan audience understood. This can be shown through the ideology of the two houses, the House of York and the House of Lancaster, and the historical setting in which I had used to express my intentions. I feel as though the modern audience has ignorance toward my historical works, as they don't appreciate the value of religion and history through the characterisation and moral portrayed through Richard III can show many recurring similarities to modern day society.
I completely respect your creativity, Shakespeare, and I wish the modern audience had the same appreciation for your works in which I do. Pacino, what were you trying to convey in your interpretation Looking for Richard, and how do you feel you represented Richard's character to appease the modern audience?
The art form that is Shakespeare's work is heavily underappreciated.
Well, thank you.
I personally feel as though the modern audience doesn't formally understand the art of poetry and how it has shaped the theatrics of today's society. Therefore, creating Looking for Richard was a way to express the continuity and values that Shakespeare presents in his historical works. This is presented in the use of characterization and imagery of Richard's character, and the contrast of his means in comparison to his fellow characters. King Richard demonstrates the social construct of villainy and how this human behavior is a recurring substance throughout generations. Throughout my docudrama, I intended to portray Richard himself as a villain, in which I use chiaroscuro lighting throughout his soliloquies to emphasize his darkness as a character. But to add depth to the docudrama, I also alter my own behaviors to similarly represent how the influence of theater and literature can develop a person's sense of being, in the notion that looking for Richard becomes easy, and we can find him in the world around us. The use of the docudrama also allows me to represent the historical drama in a modernized concept, which I had emphasized through the use of a handheld camera in order to retain the stream of conscious feeling. The modernization of society plays a very important role in how we can interact with the modern audience. Influences such as technology, social media, and globalization have all heavily impacted how the development of the human psyche over time has changed the way people view textual information and how they perceive historical works. I utilize the art of juxtaposition to express the differences between modernized society and Shakespeare's Elizabethan era, in which I use by switching between my actors who are fully costumed, playing their roles, arguing around a table. This can also convey the gap between Shakespearean works and the modern audience. I feel as though by using this style of filming, it allows me to incorporate the opinions of those who weren't knowledgeable on Shakespeare's work, as well as concurrently educating and informing those watching on the importance of Shakespearean art form. My work thoroughly represents the time period and values shown within the 20th century, and concurrently upholds the moral that Shakespeare had portrayed within this historical tragedy, King Richard III.
So, the representation of history is a very important asset to both films. In which perspective do you believe that you have incorporated the value of historical context, Shakespeare?
Well, Janaya, it's called historical tragedy for a reason. Without each element of historical, social and religious context, my work would be meaningless. The play comes from the basis of King Richard's position as ruler and how his own Machiavellian characteristics has allowed him to fall in defeat. Incorporating the War of Roses allowed me to express the importance of history and how it plays a powerful part in the evolution of society, of the social hierarchy. England's ruling elite, particularly families having royal blood flowing through their veins, bore the brunt of it all, presented through the ongoing war between the Lancasters and the Yorks, alluding to multiple biblical analogues, allowing me to connect with the Elizabethan audience as well, in which religion was a well-valued concept during the Elizabethan era. I used the presentation of emotive language and symbolism to demonstrate Richard's defiance of God's plan. This can be seen within Richard's manipulative wooing of Lady Anne in Act 1, Scene 2, which also holds relevance to the Elizabethan era as women were held as products of man. This image of masculine superiority is displayed through this scene as she is quite literally seduced in front of her dead husband's coffin, in the will that she will have nothing without the companionship of a male partner. I feel as though my work completely shows relevance to the audience viewing my historical work in my time period, but it also connects to the modern audience as it views the development of societal values over time and the importance of historical context within text.
So, Pacino, your quote that sparked the whole debate. What's the thing that gets between us and Shakespeare? How do you think you re-embark in Shakespeare's King Richard III in your interpretation, Looking for Richard, and how do you incorporate the value of historical context?
The pursuit of power and the manipulative assets of Richard's character within Shakespeare's King Richard III will forever stay relevant throughout generations. Although the context in which Shakespeare addresses the history of his characters and the religious referencing seems to bore the youngins in today's society, I feel as though that this is where I decided to make the change and alter my interpretation on his work in order to reconnect the modern audience back to the man that constructed a vast majority of the English language. My docudrama allowed me to incorporate the relationship between theatrical performance, audience engagement, and the altitudes towards Shakespearean drama. By playing the knight Naif, it allowed me to adopt the characteristics of Richard and develop my character to perform in a manipulative way, coinciding with the progressive process of the docudrama in which it basically became a one-man show, in which I used in order to represent the importance of the pursuit of power and how it relates to the original works. Although, I feel as though my interpretation of historical context addresses Shakespeare himself, rather than the historical context in King Richard III. The aim for my docudrama is to reconnect the modern audience with Shakespeare in which I visit, Shakespeare's birthplace, and the reconstruction of the Globe Theatre with my company in an attempt to gain more knowledge on the man himself, as well as educating the rest of my company in order to, get a sense of those old spirits. Method acting type stuff? Though, in order to induce a sense of relevancy to the modern day audience, I incorporate the basketball court as a battleground in which is the site of many warring battles, especially in the eyes of an American, as it is the most popular sport. Utilizing this setting allows me to connect with the modern audience as it is, whilst having a similarity in setting to the original Shakespearean work. The purpose of my docudrama will never truly reconnect the modern audience with the values portrayed in Shakespeare's King Richard III, but it has provided the perception that Shakespeare still exists in the modern world.
I feel as though both texts show similarities between the performance of the vice. In what ways do you believe that Richard is utilised to portray the main ideas and the meaning behind each of your texts?
Personally, the representation of our protagonists is purely based on the time period, although there is many common ground in which they both represent the malevolent characteristics that I had originated with my works. Each film has their own interpretation from the audience, though I do agree that both of us have used Richard as a protagonist to display the true meaning of our works.
Exactly. Richard is the embodiment of deceit and villainy, and I agree that those values are concurrent within both works. It shows the complexity of the human psyche and what the pursuit of power can achieve as well as lose, expressed in the timeline of both films in which Richard's fate ends in mortality. The traits that Richard's character symbolizes in both King Richard III and Looking for Richard will forever stay relevant to any modern audience, as it is a timeless concept, though the constant change in values within society will always alter the merit shown towards the context of Shakespeare's work.
Thank you guys so much for participating in this episode of Talking Textual. I myself have gained a greater knowledge on both works, and to respond to your question, Pacino, Shakespeare's individuality shall never be replaced, and the importance of historical context may not be enjoyed thoroughly by the modern audience. But I do believe that with the assistance of your docudrama, Looking for Richard, it has allowed the modern audience to interpret the importance of Richard's character and how he is within every one of us.
Thank you for having us.
Anyways, thank you for listening to today's episode of Talking Textual. Our next episode, we will have Amanda Ray and the class of Year 12 Advanced English addressing the importance of brownies. Hope you guys have a great day.